Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we find ourselves in a cold and dark helicopter on the ramp at Incirlik on the Syria map. Now that everyone has had some time to play around with the Apache, I wanted to take a few minutes to show you around the front seat. We're going to take a look at the different controls and systems in the front, talk about what and where things are, and then I'll tell you about the controls, buttons, and switches that I have bound to my controls. So let's tell George to step aside so we can hop in the front seat. However, before we can move up front, we need to get some electrical power on the aircraft, and we'll do that by starting the APU. If you're looking for a great startup tutorial, check out Casmo's video where he covers a complete startup and shutdown. I'll link it in the description. First, we'll turn on the battery, make sure the tail wheel is locked and the light is extinguished, and then we'll test the lights with the press to test button. Now that we see all the lights work, we'll do a quick fire detection test to ensure that the circuitry is functional. When we move the test to the 1 position, we'll get the Engine 1 fire light, APU fire light, Engine 2 fire light, aft deck fire warning in the EUFD, a flashing master warning, and the audio annunciation. When we check the number 2 circuit, we'll get all of those, plus the 2 discharge lights on the panel. Now that everything checks out, we'll crank the APU. Clear P. Lift the cover, press the button, and watch the aircraft come to life.
Hydraulic failure.
When we first get in the front seat, we can see that the iHeads is in front of our eye with a message telling us that we need to do an iHeads bore sight. Let's do that quickly to get rid of the message. We do the bore sight to align our helmet with all of the things on the aircraft that we are going to want to follow our head, such as the TADS, PINVIS, and 30mm cannon. Okay, let's start on the left and make our way around to the right. Starting behind the Kevlar panel, we have the Stores Jettison panel. It functions just like the one in the back seat. We press the button for the station we want to jettison. The button lights up with the word ARM, and then we can press the jettison button to jettison that station. Next is the interior light panel. You'll notice that I didn't say interior-exterior, and that's because the exterior lights can only be controlled from the back seat. These knobs and buttons function just as they do in the back, but for the CPG station. The next panel up has our tailwheel lock select button. We know that when we press that, the tailwheel unlocks and a light will illuminate inside the button that says unlocked. And we'll also get the tailwheel unlock select advisory in the EUFD. When we press it a second time, it actions the pin to lock the tailwheel, and we will get the tailwheel lock select advisory in the EUFD. But the unlock light in the button will not extinguish until the pin is actually seated in the hole. Most pilots will only lock the tailwheel while taxiing straight ahead to ensure that the pin goes into the hole. Also on the same panel is the NVS or Night Vision Sensor mode switch. This is a 3-position switch with off, norm, and fixed positions. It's currently off. When we move the switch to the norm position, our TADS FLIR imagery appears in our HDU. We've already done our iHeads bore sight, so the TADS should follow our head movements, and it does. This is in the flight mode. If we want to slave our TADS to our head in the targeting mode, this switch should be off, our sight select switch on the TDEC should be to TADS, and our acquisition source should be set to GHS for gunner helmet sight. But more on that later. If we move the switch to the fixed position, the TADS will slave fixed forward, which is useful in emergency situations, but otherwise not really used. Moving up, we are now at the power quadrant. The two power levers have 4 positions each: off, idle, fly, and lockout. Again, check out Casmo's tutorial if you want to see the detailed startup procedure. But before we leave this quadrant, let's talk about the lockout position. Normally, in the fly position, each engine's power is managed by its own DEC, Digital Electronic Control. Think of the DEC as an engine governor that does a little bit more. The DECs on each engine talk to each other to help with torque matching and load sharing, so that one engine doesn't have to do more work than the other. In situations where one engine does need to do more work, such as an engine failure, the operating engine DEC detects that the other engine has failed and allows the operating engine to work harder to pick up the load. It does other things too, such as hot start prevention and TGT limiting to prevent you from burning up the engine. So when would you need to move the power lever to lockout? The bottom line is that if the engine isn't providing the power you need because of a malfunction of some sort, you would use this feature. To use it, you lift the finger lift on the appropriate power lever, very quickly move the power lever to lockout, and immediately move it back to about halfway of normal travel. The DEC will hand over control very fast, so if you don't catch it fast enough, you can overspeed the engine and cause a flameout, or worse. What's worse than a flameout? Moving up on the left side, we are at the emergency panel. The guard button tunes your UHF radio to the guard frequency, and the transponder button turns your transponder to the emergency code. The zeroize switch is going to zeroize classified data, and that's all I'm going to say about that. The emergency hydraulic button will only be used in emergencies, and it allows the accumulator hydraulic pressure to run into the utility hydraulic system as a last-ditch effort to provide some hydraulics to the flight controls. I don't know if it's modeled, but I would guess it's not. Next up is the keyboard unit, or KU, with which you're probably familiar. Then we have the left MPD. Moving up to the left corner, we have the canopy jettison handle. When the aircraft is powered off, the pin, down here, is put into the hole on the handle to prevent inadvertent activation of the canopy jettison. However, as soon as we get in the aircraft, we move it to the storage location. It's not modeled, but in the real aircraft, when it's rotated and pushed, there is detonation cord around each of the acrylic windows for both crew stations that is activated. The windows don't blow out though. They might fall out, or they might have to be pushed a little bit to fall out. Next, we have the fire detection and extinguishing panel. These buttons are linked to 2 circuits that travel through the engine compartments and the aft deck area, which is where the APU is. We did the test in the back seat when we started, so let's talk about an actual fire. If we were to get a fire, the respective light will illuminate. The first thing we would do before we push the button is to ensure we are in a situation where we are either on the ground or at an airspeed where we can maintain single engine flight. The last thing we want to do is shut off an engine in an OGE hover. Once that's confirmed, we lift the cover and press the button. This does a few things. It shuts off the fuel to the engine, shuts off the bleed air from the engine, arms the fire bottle, closes the louver door that allow airflow into the engine, turns off the voice warning, and turns off the master warning light. Once the ready light illuminates, you can press the discharge button to discharge the bottle. If you press the fire button again before discharging the bottle, the system reverses all of those steps. The armament panel has the arm safe switch and ground override switch, which function just as they do in the back seat. Moving across the TDAC, we get to this little black hole. This is where the cold air comes out. Next is the Enhanced Upfront Display, or EUFD. What makes it enhanced? The old UFD didn't have this many buttons on it, so this was a nice improvement. Moving down, we have the Master Zero Eyes switch, which zeroizes some more stuff than the other switch, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Down on the right side, we have our comm panel. Just double check everything to ensure that it's set the way that you want. Some of these knobs are turned all the way down on a cold start, so if you want to hear your radios, make sure that you check them. The top knobs are individual volume controls for each of your radios. The row of switches are activate and deactivate your squelch for each of those radios. Then you have the master volume, the Vox, or voice activated sensitivity, the microphone mode switch with press to talk, Vox, and hot mic positions, and your transponder ident button. Finally, on the bottom row, you have individual volume controls for different devices, starting from the left, identify friend or foe, then radar laser warning receiver, then air-to-air, which is not used, then your VCR, and then your ADF, or automatic direction finder. This particular model of Apache had a VCR in the aft avionics bay that recorded your TADS video to an actual video tape, and you could watch it back in the cockpit. Moving down, you have the windshield wiper panel. The push button activates defog air, mostly for the side panels, and the wiper switch has 4 positions: park, off, low, and high. To use, turn the switch to low or high. When done, turn it to the off position. If the wiper stops somewhere other than full down, hold the switch to the park position until the wiper parks in the full down position. Each cockpit's wiper is independent of the other. Below that panel is the processor select panel. This consists of a display light that can illuminate either SP1 or SP2 for System Processor 1 or System Processor 2, as well as a 3-position switch to select either SP1, SP2, or automatic mode. What do the system processors do? Well, basically, they manage the electronic communications between all of the black boxes in the helicopter. This is normally left in the auto position unless there's a procedure that tells you to move the switch. Moving around to the right, we have our trusty M4. If you didn't already know, you can actually move the select fire switch and pull the trigger, although thankfully there isn't a round in the chamber, or else you'd put a hole in the glass. Finally, up to the right, we have these boxes, which are the sensors that detect the position of your head. There's one on each side, and they create this invisible box around your head. The iHead's helmet has sensors in it that communicate with these boxes to figure out where your head is in space, and that is what allows your TADS, PINVIS, and 30mm cannon to actually follow your head. You'll notice one glaring omission in my orientation to the CPG station, and that's the TDAC. Well, that'll come in part 2 of this video, where I will show you the controls that I have bound to a PlayStation controller that I use as my primary control when engaging targets, which I'm using in this footage you see now. I know this wasn't an action-packed video, but if you stuck around this long, I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. If you have, please remember to hit those like and subscribe buttons. We have over 1,600 subscribers to the channel now, and I couldn't be more grateful to all of you out there who have taken the time to watch my videos. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in part 2.